75 lives hang in the balance as an Airbus A310 spirals toward the ground. The cause? Not engine failure, not bad weather, but a teenager's innocent touch that unknowingly disengaged the autopilot. What seemed like a harmless mistake would send Aeroflot Flight 593 into chaos. No chance of recovery, no time to act. Aeroflot Flight 593 was a routine journey, but it would soon become one of aviation's darkest moments. The aircraft involved was a leased Airbus A310-304, registration F-OGQS. Delivered to Aeroflot in December 1992, it was part of a fleet operated by Russian International Airlines. Powered by General Electric engines, the A310 had flown hundreds of miles before that fateful day. The crew, experienced with around 900 hours on the aircraft, had no idea that their next flight would end in tragedy. The Airbus A310 comes with a powerful autopilot system. It helps pilots by controlling speed, altitude, and direction. The autopilot does a lot of the work, but it still needs to be watched. It's not a set and forget system. The autopilot uses the flight path indicator, FPI, to show where the plane is going. It's like a roadmap for the pilots. The system helps keep the plane on course, but pilots must keep an eye on the system. If something goes wrong, it can cause big problems. On Flight 593, the autopilot was on, but when the child touched the controls, it broke the connection. The autopilot couldn't control the plane's ailerons. This small mistake caused the plane to veer off course. The pilots didn't notice the change. They were used to loud warning sounds, not a quiet light. This missed warning set the stage for the crash. The passengers settle in as Aeroflot Flight 593 takes off. There are 63 people on board. 40 of them are Russian nationals, including airline workers and their families. The other 23 are businessmen from Hong Kong and Taiwan. They are all looking for new opportunities in Russia. The crew is set. Captain Andrei Viktorovich Danilov, 40, has 9,500 flight hours with 950 hours in the A310. First Officer Igor Vasilievich Piskaryov, 33, has 5,885 flight hours, 440 in the A310. Relief Captain Yaroslav Vladimirovich Kudrinsky, 39, has 8,900 hours, including 907 in the A310. Along with 9 flight attendants, they are ready for the flight. But in the cockpit, things are about to go wrong. It's 23rd March, 1994. Aeroflot Flight 593 is on its way from Moscow to Hong Kong. The Airbus A310, a well-known aircraft, begins its journey at Sheremetyevo International Airport. There are 75 people on board, 63 passengers and 12 crew members. Among the passengers is Captain Yaroslav Kudrinsky, the relief captain, who is flying with his 2 children, Eldar, 15, and Yana, 13. They're excited. It's their first international flight. Little do they know, this family moment will soon turn into a disaster. The crew seems confident. Captain Andrei Danilov has over 9,500 hours of flying experience. First Officer Igor Piskaryov, with nearly 6,000 hours, has been training hard for this moment. Everything seems routine, but the crew doesn't realize how quickly things will spiral out of control. The plane takes off smoothly, climbing into the night sky. It's just another flight. Cruising through the air, the autopilot is on. Everyone relaxes, but as the flight continues, a mistake begins to unfold. Slowly and quietly, Relief Captain Kudrinsky makes a decision. It's a harmless gesture, or so it seems. He allows his children to sit in the cockpit with him. He lets them play with the controls, thinking it will be a fun experience. But this is against protocol. The kids are not trained to handle an aircraft. They are unaware of the dangers lurking. At 0043, Yana sits at the left seat, with the autopilot still engaged. Kudrinsky, wanting to make her feel like she's flying, adjusts the autopilot. He lets her think she's turning the aircraft, but she's not in control. The autopilot is doing all the work. Soon after, Eldar switches places with his sister. At 0051, he's now seated at the controls, completely unaware of the disaster about to unfold. Everything started normal. The plane was flying straight and level. The autopilot was doing its job. But when the child fiddled with the controls, the plane slowly started turning right. At first, the turn wasn't big. The crew probably thought the autopilot was just making a small adjustment, but the turn kept going. Soon, the plane was at a steep angle. It was almost at 90 degrees. The autopilot was off by then. The pilots had to act fast, but they were already behind. They were confused. The flight path indicator should have warned them, but they were too far into the problem. The plane was descending fast. The pilots were fighting for control. What started as a small turn became a deadly spiral. Eldar is fiddling with the controls when disaster strikes. With just a little force, he contradicts the autopilot's commands. For 30 seconds, the autopilot loses control of the ailerons, leaving the aircraft partially in manual control. This seems like a small issue, but it's enough to cause a chain reaction. A silent indicator light appears to warn the pilots, but they don't notice. They're used to audible signals, not silent lights. The plane begins to bank to the right. It's a gradual turn, but the pilots don't realize it's happening. They're caught off guard. The flight path indicator changes, and for a moment, the pilots believe they're in a holding pattern, but the turn keeps going. It's too steep. The plane reaches a 45-degree angle, then nearly 90 degrees. This is more than the A310 is designed to handle. The aircraft begins to descend. The pilots, confused and disoriented, struggle to level the plane. The increased G-forces make it difficult to control. What started as a small issue quickly grows into a deadly problem. Things spiral out of control. The autopilot tries to compensate by pitching the nose up, but it only makes things worse. The plane stalls, its engines struggling to maintain power. The autopilot disengages completely, and the flight crew is left to deal with the consequences. At this point, the plane is in freefall. The G-forces push the pilots down. They can feel the plane starting to dive, but there's a brief moment of hope. Kudrinsky manages to retake control of the aircraft. The first officer pulls the plane out of the dive. They're fighting for control, but it's not enough. The plane is climbing steeply, and soon it stalls again. The plane is now in a spin. It's out of control. The pilots struggle to regain balance. They're fighting for their lives, but every move seems to make things worse. The aircraft begins to spin again, faster this time. Kudrinsky and Piskaryov fight to stabilize the plane, but they don't know how far they've descended. Engines begin to fail. In the midst of the chaos, Kudrinsky and Piskaryov try to pull the plane out of the spin. They overcorrect, pulling the yoke too hard. This causes the speed to drop, making recovery even harder. A rudder input sends the plane into a flat spin. The pilots are desperate now. They try again to regain control, but the altitude is too low. The plane has descended too far to recover. They don't know it yet, but they're too close to the ground. Every second counts, but they're running out of time. The plane crashes at 0058, a terrifying 160 miles per hour. The impact is devastating. There's no time for distress calls. There's no time to prepare. Everything happens so fast. The aircraft smashes into the remote Kuznetsk-Alatau mountain range. The wreckage is scattered. The impact brutal. The wreckage is found the next day. Search teams locate the crash site deep in the mountains. The flight data recorders are recovered, but the wreckage tells the tragic story of what happened. The pilots, despite their best efforts, couldn't save the plane. It wasn't a mechanical failure. It was human error, one small mistake that spiraled out of control. Families mourn their losses. Russian families place flowers on the crash site, remembering the loved ones they lost. Families from China and Taiwan leave messages on pieces of paper, a tribute to their loved ones. But the crash site also stands as a stark reminder. One decision, one moment can change everything. It's a family trip gone wrong, a tragedy caused by a simple mistake, and it could have been prevented. The End Aeroflot Flight 593 story is one of human error and devastating consequences, but it's also a powerful reminder of how a single moment can change everything. Would you have made the same decisions in the cockpit? Remember, in aviation, every choice, no matter how small, can determine the outcome. Stay vigilant, stay safe.